You know what's one weapon class that always seems to be part of the meta no matter what? The short-range shooters. Yeah, they've fallen off a bit in Splatoon, but you'll always see like a Splash-O-Matic or a Splatter Shot or an N-Zap or something like that in competitive play. It'd be really weird if we didn't see any of them, right? We're not, guys, we're not seeing any of them. Like, we're legitimately not seeing the most basic class in Splatoon. Splattershot Jr., barely ever used. The most we've seen is one recent area cup where it was ran with Brella, Heavy, and Mint for an insane paint output, insane sustained playstyle that thankfully lost because no, you don't want to fight that. That's not fun. I promise. That is not what you want. No, no, no. Keep that away from this game. Thank you. Splash-O-Matic, which has just been continually trending downward, having pretty much no results recently, but still keeping up in solo rank to the point where it got, a plus 10 points for special. Neosplash hasn't been seen in a very long time, as its kind of paint spam, not fight playstyle has been not optimal for competitive play for a bit. Shot hasn't been seen enough to the point where it's getting minus 10 points for special on its Zuka, and this has been overshadowed by, Neosplash, and it still kind of is, even with the more fight-based playstyle. But these haven't seen use for a while. Pretty much ever since the Zuka nerf, this hasn't been seen as very worth it for a support playstyle. 52 Gal is kind of the exception to this, as it was pretty prominently seen in recent area cups, and I'll probably talk about that later, but we'll see. I do want to say that 52 is kind of different. This isn't really supported. This is a clear fighting identity that goes in and uses its wall for its matchups, and is naturally just a lot more, stat heavy than the other short-range shooters, so it makes more sense we'd see this. And finally, N-Zap, the weapon that seemed to be the weapon to be picked for coolerless weapons like Bow or E-Leader, has pretty much completely lost its usage as well. It's been really overshadowed by Red Dapples and Tri-Slosher Nouveau. Even Dynamo Roller has higher results than this thing recently, getting second in a recent area cup, whereas Zap has basically been non-existent. So, what's going on? We just increased all of these weapons' hitboxes more than other weapons, and we put aura in the game that helps their movement out. Why aren't we seeing them at all? Where did they go? Well, I think it's kind of a little bit simple. This isn't going to be the longest discussion in the world, but they've been either overshadowed or replaced. Zap is probably the best example, where options like Tri-Slosher Nouveau, Dapple Dooley, or even Dynamo offer a lot of fighting power. Zap does offer mobility, but even that isn't truly unique to it. Same for the Lethal Bomb. It's kinda hard to argue for when there's all these other options. Zap isn't necessarily bad by any means, it's just not the best option anymore. But mainly, that's because of how these comps have been designed. Leader comps and pencil comps used to be very similar. You ran leader zap plus double AoE, or you played pencil and like a splash or something plus double AoE. And that gave Zap a lot to work off. If a bucket hit somebody, you got the one shot there. If the blaster or pen hit one, you got two shots and you got your kill. You had a lot of damage to work off, and you were basically the only mobile weapon in the comp, which gave you a good use case. Nowadays, though, it's just a little bit different. Bow comps need a VAC 96 for sustain a lot of the time, so overlapping double shooter doesn't make a lot of sense, where Tri-Slosher and Dapple Dooley can fight a lot more. If you're running E-Leader, not only do they, also want VAC 96, we'll get to that in a bit, but Tri-Slosher Nouveau is just a much better option for it. Tri-Slosher Nouveau has much better synergy with Leader, as it prevents it being rushed down. I'm not talking about the 60 damage to 40 damage tap shot, just, if you're fighting a Leader and you want to rush it down, this is a pretty good deterrent. It's just a weapon that's going to stop that and be able to fend off attackers. Furthermore, if you're in competitive play and want to take Leader to short-range maps, well, pretty much all of them are going to be amazing for Tri. You want to go to Urchin, to Flounder, to Humpback? Yeah, take the Tri-Slosher player there. That sounds like a fantastic idea. There's just much stronger synergies for Zap than there were previously. Splash kind of has similar problems. It does see a little bit more use, I would say, when you're paired with the pencil comp, but even then it hasn't been as much. If anything, that's been what pencil comps have been struggling with. We've still seen Pencil, Slosher, S-Blast put up pretty good fights against some of the new stuff that's been being picked. It's gone 2-3 against the comps that have been winning area cups. But if I have to look at the one slot that seemed the most awkward, it's the short-range support role that's swapped a lot recently. In fact, we've even seen 52 used, an option that we know is kinda awkward and strange because it doesn't really have support tools. But I guess it can keep up when fighting a bit more of these sustain options since, Wall is pretty good into that. But even that doesn't seem to be working out quite well, and these comps do kind of need a mobility option for them. So I'm not really sure what's going to work out in that case. When it comes to Splattershot, I think it's a little simpler. It has all the problems Splash does, but also a much more mediocre kit with Zuka's inconsistency. But I think it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, though. There's a lot more options that are good against short range. There are things like rollers, there's blaster, there's heavy splatling. Just in general, there is a lot more options that are good into short range. We're seeing a lot more short range slayers be picked. And so because of that, I think instead of the short range shooters that are really good, it is the mid-range ones of Forge and, well, especially Vacuum 96 that have ended up thriving. These weapons have pretty good kits. If you want a bomb in an entry special, Forge is pretty good at that. I've seen some people point to its paint not being as good, but I think that this is honestly enough. And to be honest, when it comes to Pen, S-Blast, Bucket comps, if I had to gamble on what I think the future is for them, I think it's this weapon. Forge keeps up a lot better with fighting power, its damage numbers combo much better with Pencil and a weapon like S-Blast, and Booyah Bomb is a very solid and consistent entry special that's honestly better than Splash's Crab Take anyway, while being 10 points for special cheaper. I don't think Forge is overtuned by any means, I just think it's underrated, and while I don't think it meshes particularly well with the more sustain-heavy comps VAC 96 has been used with, we have seen some success with E-Leader, as this got picked with Tri-Slosher, Slosher, and E-Leader as a more fighting-focused version of leader comps. I don't really see why this wouldn't work well with Pencil, S-Blast, Pen, to be honest, and PXG even used this for a little bit back in summer of last year, and from what I can tell, they had a lot of success with it. When they lost in SWS, they actually swapped off this weapon. So I feel like Forge might be a solid answer to this. But well, if you're playing for any kind of sustain, which you're usually going to be doing if you're playing bow or leader comps, VAC 96 is right there. These mid-range supports just don't really have the same matchup problems. Yes, they have less mobility, but being able to paint from further away and have higher damage allows them to avoid a lot of the problems dealing with certain harsher matchups than short-range options do. So I think that's worth noting. I don't really think this needs a fix by any means, as I don't think short-range shooters are necessarily in a bad spot. I just think a lot of their counters are very good. In particular, V-Blast and Heavy being very overtuned is kind of a problem for them, as those are the main options I see really holding them back. But maybe sustained choices like VAC 96 should be a little bit more expensive. The mid-range shooters are a bit faster at getting specials than the short-range ones generally, and that might not be the greatest thing, though I don't think Forge needs to be 210 by any means. This one definitely does. So that's what's going on with short-range shooters. There's just a lot of counters and a lot of comparable options that make it difficult to justify running them over other combinations. They're still solid, and if you see one of them, it's not like it's a throw by any means, but I do think they're going to continue to trend down out of popularity, and I especially do believe in Forge as the answer for Pen, S-Blast, and Slosher comps. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. See y'all.